The rain came down in sheets that November afternoon as Natasha Brooks stood at the iron gates of Whitmore Farms, her 3 sons pressed against her sides. Caleb, Jordan, and Thomas, identical in every way except for the small birthmarks that helped her tell them apart, shivered in their thin jackets. The security guard's eyes went wide when he saw her. "Mrs. Whitmore," he stammered, then corrected himself. "I mean, Ms. Brooks. It's me, Gerald." Natasha's voice was barely above a whisper. She had not slept in 2 days. The eviction notice was in her purse, along with $17 and a maxed-out credit card. "I need to see Christopher." Gerald's hand moved to the phone at his station. Natasha wanted to tell him to stop, to say she had changed her mind, but Jordan tugged on her sleeve. "Mama, I'm hungry." The words shattered what little pride she had left. Her babies were hungry. She had fed them the last of the bread that morning, plain and dry because the butter had run out 3 days ago. What kind of mother was she? The apartment was gone. Her car had been repossessed last week. She had called every friend, every distant relative, but no one could take in a woman with 3 young boys. "Call him," she said firmly. "Please." Gerald nodded and picked up the phone. Natasha heard the murmured conversation, watched his expression change from surprise to something like pity. She hated that look. She had seen it too many times in the past 4 years. "He's coming down," Gerald said, pressing the button to open the gates. "You can wait by the main house." The walk up the long driveway felt like a death march. The boys, sensing her tension, stayed quiet. She remembered the first time she had walked this path, 5 years ago, her hand in Christopher's, her heart full of love and hope. She had believed their love could overcome anything. How wrong she had been. The main house loomed ahead, all white columns and manicured lawns. Even in the rain, it looked perfect. Natasha's stomach churned. She did not belong here anymore. She never really had. But then she looked down at Caleb, at his grey eyes that were exactly like his father's, and she knew she had no choice. She would swallow every ounce of pride. She would accept every offer of help. She would do whatever it took to keep her boys safe and fed. The front door opened, and Christopher Whitmore stepped out onto the porch. He had aged in the 5 years since their divorce. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there before, and grey streaked his dark hair at the temples. He wore jeans and a work shirt, clearly having come from the fields. His eyes landed on her first, and she saw the flash of recognition, of old pain and anger. Then his gaze dropped to the boys, and his face went completely white. 3 sets of grey eyes stared back at him. 3 faces that were miniature versions of his own childhood photos. 3 sons he had not known existed. Christopher's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He gripped the porch railing like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Hello, Christopher," Natasha said quietly. "These are your sons. Caleb, Jordan, and Thomas. They're 4 years old. Have you ever had to choose between your pride and your children's survival? What would you do if the person you once loved was your only hope? Drop a comment below and subscribe to see how this family's story changes everything." Natasha had met Christopher at a charity gala in downtown Chicago. She was there as part of the catering staff, working her second job to pay off student loans. He was there as one of the major donors, a billionaire farm owner whose family had worked the land for 5 generations. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and something sparked. He made his way through the crowd to talk to her, ignoring the disapproving stares of the other guests. By the end of the night, he had her number. Their courtship was fast and intense. Christopher did not care that she was a waitress with 2 jobs and a mountain of debt. He loved her laugh, her strength, the way she challenged him on everything. Within 6 months, they were married in a small ceremony that his mother had refused to attend. The first year was beautiful. Christopher showed her the farm, taught her about sustainable agriculture and community programs. Natasha fell in love with the land as much as she loved him. She started working on ideas for a program to help low-income families access fresh produce. But the cracks began to show. Helen Whitmore made her disapproval clear at every family gathering. Christopher's business partners made comments about his social justice marriage. Photographers followed them everywhere, writing articles about the billionaire and his black wife, speculating about how long it would last. Natasha tried to ignore it, but the constant scrutiny wore her down. She and Christopher started fighting about small things that grew into bigger issues. Then she got pregnant. They were both overjoyed. Christopher immediately started planning the nursery, talking about teaching their child to ride horses and work the land. Helen even softened a little, speaking to Natasha for the first time in months about baby names and family traditions. But at 12 weeks, Natasha started bleeding. The doctors could not save the pregnancy. She lost the baby in the hospital, Christopher holding her hand while she cried. Something broke in him that day. He pulled away from her, throwing himself into work. When she tried to talk about it, to grieve together, he shut her out. Then one night, after too much whiskey, he said the words that ended their marriage. Maybe this happened for a reason. Maybe we were not meant to be parents together. Natasha filed for divorce the next week. The settlement was generous, but she refused to take more than she needed to get back on her feet. Her lawyer thought she was foolish, but she did not want Christopher's money. She wanted her heart back. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, she took a pregnancy test on a whim. 3 lines appeared. She was pregnant. The doctor confirmed it a few days later and told her something that made her head spin. Triplets. She had conceived them before the miscarriage, some kind of rare occurrence that the doctor explained but that Natasha barely understood. Her body had held on to these 3 while letting the first one go. She thought about calling Christopher 100 times. But every time she picked up the phone, she remembered his words. Maybe we were not meant to be parents together. He had made his feelings clear. So she decided to do it alone. The pregnancy was difficult. She worked until she was 7 months along, saving every penny. When the boys were born, healthy and perfect, she named them without Christopher's input. Caleb, Jordan, and Thomas Brooks. The first year was the hardest. 3 babies meant 3 times the diapers, 3 times the formula, 3 times the sleepless nights. She went back to work when they were 3 months old, finding a daycare that offered a sliding scale payment plan. She worked 3 jobs. Waitressing during the day, cleaning offices at night, and doing freelance bookkeeping on weekends while the boys napped. She was always tired, always stressed, always worried about money. But she was proud. She was doing it alone. She did not need Christopher Whitmore or his family's judgment or his money. Until the medical bills started piling up. Jordan had chronic ear infections that required specialist visits. Thomas needed speech therapy. Caleb had a dairy allergy that made formula expensive. Her insurance, barely adequate to begin with, did not cover everything. The debt grew. She fell behind on rent. She started choosing between groceries and electricity. And last month, the eviction notice came. Pride, she realized too late, was a luxury she could not afford. Christopher stood frozen on the porch, staring at the 3 small faces that looked exactly like his own childhood photos. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. How, he finally managed. You said you were not pregnant. The divorce papers. I found out 2 weeks after the divorce was final, Natasha said. Her voice was steady, but he could see her hands shaking. The doctor said it was rare, something about conceiving before the miscarriage but the pregnancy not showing up on tests until later. He descended the porch steps slowly, as if afraid sudden movement would make them disappear. The boys watched him with curious eyes. One of them, the smallest, hid partly behind Natasha's leg. Why did you not tell me? Christopher's voice cracked. 4 years, Natasha. You kept my sons from me for 4 years. You said we were not meant to be parents together, she replied quietly. You made it very clear how you felt. The words hit him like a physical blow. He remembered that night, the grief and alcohol and stupid, hurtful things he had said. Things he had regretted every day since but had been too proud to take back. I was wrong, he said, his eyes never leaving the boys. I was grieving and angry and I took it out on you. I have regretted those words every single day. One of the boys stepped forward. Are you our daddy? Christopher dropped to his knees, not caring about the wet ground soaking through his jeans. Yes, he whispered. I'm your daddy. What's your name? I'm Caleb. That's Jordan, and that's Thomas. He's shy. Hi, Caleb. Hi, Jordan. Hi, Thomas. Christopher's eyes filled with tears. It's very nice to meet you. Natasha watched this interaction with a mix of emotions she could not name. Relief, sadness, fear, hope. They all tangled together in her chest. Why are you here? Christopher asked, standing up and finally looking at her properly. He saw what he had missed initially in his shock. The dark circles under her eyes. The worn coat that was too thin for November. The boys' clothes that were clean but obviously secondhand. I lost my apartment, Natasha said. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I have nowhere else to go. The boys need food and a warm place to sleep. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for them. Christopher's jaw tightened. He wanted to ask why she had let it get this bad, why she had not called sooner, but the answers did not matter right now. His sons were cold and hungry. That was all that mattered. You'll stay here, he said firmly. All of you. The guest house has 3 bedrooms. I'll have Mrs. Patterson prepare it immediately. Christopher, No arguments, he said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. These are my sons. Your pride ends now, Natasha. I'm getting them a doctor's appointment tomorrow for checkups. I'm setting up accounts for their expenses. I'm hiring a lawyer to establish custody and child support. And you are accepting all of it. Natasha wanted to argue. Every fiber of her being screamed against accepting his help. But Jordan tugged on her sleeve again, and she looked down at his tired face. Okay, she said softly. Thank you. Christopher called for Mrs. Patterson, his longtime housekeeper, who appeared within minutes. Her eyes widened when she saw Natasha and the boys, but she recovered quickly. Mrs. Patterson, please prepare the guest house for Ms. Brooks and the boys. They'll be staying indefinitely. Make sure the heat is on and there's food in the kitchen. Right away, Mr. Whitmore, she said, already pulling out her phone to make calls. Christopher looked at the boys again. Are you hungry right now? We can get you something while the guest house is being prepared. All 3 boys nodded vigorously. Christopher smiled, and Natasha saw a glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with. Come on then, he said, gesturing toward the main house. Let's get you boys fed. The guest house was bigger than any apartment Natasha had lived in for the past 4 years. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a full kitchen, and a living room with large windows overlooking the farm. Mrs. Patterson had stocked the refrigerator and pantry with enough food to feed them for weeks. The boys ran through the rooms, their excited voices echoing off the walls. They had never had their own bedrooms before. In the apartment, they had all shared one room while Natasha slept on the couch. Mama, look. Caleb called from one of the bedrooms. There's a bed shaped like a race car. Natasha walked into the room and stopped short. Each bedroom had been set up for a child, complete with toys, books, and clothes in various sizes. Her throat tightened. When did he do this? She whispered to Mrs. Patterson, who had followed her in. Mr. Whitmore called ahead while you were eating, the older woman said with a kind smile. He has friends with children. They donated what they could on short notice. The rest he had delivered from stores in town. Natasha sat down on the edge of Caleb's new bed, overwhelmed. I don't know how to repay this. You don't, Mrs. Patterson said simply. Those boys are his sons. This is what fathers do. That night, after the boys were bathed and put to bed in their new rooms, Natasha sat alone in the living room. She was exhausted but could not sleep. The silence was strange after years of the boys sleeping within arm's reach. A knock on the door made her jump. She opened it to find Christopher standing there with 2 mugs of tea. Thought you might need this, he said. It's chamomile. Helps with sleep. She accepted the mug and stepped aside to let him in. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Thank you, Natasha finally said. For everything today. The boys are so happy. I have 4 years to make up for, Christopher said quietly. This is just the beginning. I want to be their father, Natasha. Really be their father. Not just financially, but in every way. I want that too, she admitted. I never wanted to keep them from you. I just thought. You thought I didn't want them. Want us. He set his mug down and turned to face her. I was an idiot. I let grief turn me into someone I hated. I pushed away the person I loved most in the world. I'm sorry, Natasha. I'm so sorry. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I should have tried harder. I should have told you about them. I was just so hurt and so proud and so stupid. We both were, he said. But we get a second chance now. For the boys, and maybe for us too. Before Natasha could respond, the sound of a car pulling up outside interrupted them. Christopher frowned and went to the window. It's my mother, he said, his voice tight. Natasha's stomach dropped. Helen Whitmore had made her life miserable during their marriage. The thought of facing her again, especially now, filled her with dread. The knock on the door was sharp and imperious. Christopher opened it, and Helen Whitmore swept in, her designer coat dripping with rain. Is it true? She demanded without preamble. Do you really have 3 sons? Hello, Mother, Christopher said coldly. Yes, it's true. And you will be civil to Natasha and the boys, or you will leave. Helen's eyes landed on Natasha, and for a moment, the old contempt flickered across her face. But then something changed. Her expression softened, and she looked suddenly older. May I see them? She asked quietly. Natasha hesitated, then nodded. They're asleep. But you can look in on them. Helen followed Natasha down the hall to the first bedroom, where Thomas slept curled around a stuffed bear. Helen's hand went to her mouth. He looks just like Christopher did at that age, she whispered. They moved to the next room, where Jordan was sprawled across his bed, and then to Caleb's room, where the boy slept peacefully in his race car bed. Helen stood in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. I have 3 grandsons. Yes, Natasha said simply. I was terrible to you, Helen said, turning to face her. I judged you without knowing you. I made your life difficult because I was afraid of change, afraid of what people would think. I helped destroy your marriage. Natasha did not know what to say. She had imagined this confrontation many times, always with anger and defensive words. But standing here now, looking at this woman's genuine remorse, she felt only exhaustion. I can't change the past, Helen continued. But I would like to try to be a good grandmother. If you'll let me. Christopher appeared in the hallway, watching the exchange with surprise. Natasha thought about her own mother, who had died when she was 20. She thought about how much she had wanted her mother's help when the boys were born, how alone she had felt. They need a grandmother, she said finally. If you mean what you say, then yes. Helen nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you. I know I don't deserve it. What would it take for you to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? Can families really heal from past wounds? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to see this family's path to forgiveness. The next morning, Christopher arrived at the guest house early with breakfast from the main house. Mrs. Patterson had made pancakes, bacon, and fresh fruit. The boys ate like they had never seen so much food, which broke Christopher's heart. After breakfast, he asked Natasha if he could spend the day with the boys alone. She hesitated, then agreed. She needed to find a job, to start rebuilding some sense of independence. Can I show you the farm? Christopher asked the boys. All 3 nodded enthusiastically. They bundled up in their new coats and followed Christopher outside. The rain had stopped, leaving everything fresh and clean. Christopher started with the horses. Caleb's eyes lit up when he saw them, and he immediately ran to the fence. That's Daisy, Christopher said, pointing to a gentle mare. Would you like to pet her? Caleb nodded vigorously. Christopher lifted him up so he could reach over the fence. Daisy nuzzled Caleb's hand, and the boy giggled with delight. Can I ride her? Caleb asked. One day soon, Christopher promised. But first we have to teach you how. Would you like that? Yes, please. They moved on to the chicken coop next. Jordan was fascinated by the birds, asking a million questions about how they laid eggs and why they made different sounds. Why do chickens have feathers but not scales? Jordan asked, his face scrunched up in concentration. That's a very good question, Christopher said, impressed. What do you think? Jordan pondered this seriously. Maybe because they need to stay warm? Exactly right, Christopher said, ruffling his hair. You're a smart boy, Jordan. Jordan beamed at the praise. Mama says I ask too many questions. There's no such thing as too many questions, Christopher said firmly. Never stop being curious. Thomas, the quietest of the three, stayed close to Christopher's side. He did not talk much, but Christopher noticed how carefully he observed everything. When they reached the barn where farm equipment was stored, Thomas's eyes widened. Do you like the colors? Christopher asked, noticing Thomas studying the bright red tractor. Thomas nodded shyly. Would you like to draw them? Christopher pulled out his phone and showed Thomas a drawing app. You can take pictures and then draw them later. Thomas's face transformed. For the next hour, he carefully took photos of different equipment, animals, and buildings, his concentration absolute. At lunch, Christopher brought them to the main house. Mrs. Patterson had made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. The boys ate at the kitchen table while Christopher sat with them, learning more about their lives. What's your favorite thing to do? He asked Caleb. I like animals, Caleb said through a mouthful of sandwich. Mama took us to the zoo once. I saw lions and elephants and giraffes. Can we get a giraffe? Christopher laughed. Giraffes are a bit big for the farm. But we have lots of other animals. Maybe we could get a dog. All three boys started talking at once, excited about the possibility of a dog. Christopher made a mental note to talk to Natasha about it. Jordan, what about you? What do you like? Books, Jordan said immediately. But we don't have many. Mama gets them from the library, but sometimes she's too tired to take us. Christopher felt another pang of guilt. His sons had been living in poverty while he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. We'll go to the bookstore this week, he promised. You can pick out as many books as you want. Jordan's eyes went wide. Really? Any books? Any books? After lunch, Helen arrived. She brought art supplies for Thomas, a book about animals for Caleb, and a science kit for Jordan. She had clearly done her research, paying attention to what Christopher had told her about each boy's interests. The boys were initially shy around her, but Helen got down on the floor with them, helping Thomas with his drawings and listening to Jordan's questions about how things worked. By the end of the afternoon, Caleb was sitting in her lap while she read to him. Christopher watched this transformation in his mother with amazement. This was the grandmother he had hoped his children would have, not the cold woman who had driven Natasha away. That evening, Christopher tucked each boy into bed individually. He read Caleb a story about horses, discussed Jordan's questions about space, and sat quietly with Thomas while he drew. Daddy? Thomas whispered, the first time he had used the word. Yes, buddy. Are you? Thomas studied his face, then nodded and went back to drawing. But Christopher sat there long after Thomas fell asleep, thinking about all the time he had lost and all the promises he needed to keep. Natasha spent her first week at the farm looking for work. She applied to dozens of jobs, but most required childcare arrangements she could not afford. The few that were flexible with hours paid barely above minimum wage. She was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through job postings on her laptop, when Helen knocked on the door. Natasha tensed. They had been civil since that first night, but they had not really talked. May I come in? Helen asked. Natasha nodded, closing her laptop. Helen sat across from her, setting a folder on the table between them. I need to talk to you, Helen said. About the past, and about the future. Okay, Natasha said warily. Helen took a deep breath. When Christopher brought you home 5 years ago, I was horrible to you. I said terrible things. I made it clear you were not welcome in this family. And I did it because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that you would change everything. That you would take my son away from the life I had planned for him. Afraid of what my friends would say, what society would think. Helen's voice shook. I was raised in a different time, Natasha. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth. And I let my fear and my prejudice destroy something beautiful. Natasha did not know what to say. She had imagined Helen would always hate her. Christopher loved you so much, Helen continued. I had never seen him that happy. And when you got pregnant, when he was so excited about being a father, I should have been happy too. Instead, I was worried about bloodlines and inheritance and stupid things that don't matter. After the miscarriage, when Christopher pushed you away, I didn't stop him. I should have told him he was being cruel. I should have supported both of you. Instead, I let him ruin the best thing that ever happened to him. Tears were streaming down Helen's face now. And then you left, and he was so empty. He worked all the time, never smiled, never talked about anything but business. I realized I had helped destroy my son's happiness. And I hated myself for it. Helen, Natasha said softly. Let me finish, Helen said. When I saw those boys, when I saw my grandsons, I realized what we had all lost. What I had cost all of us with my narrow-mindedness and my prejudice. And I decided I would not make the same mistakes again. She pushed the folder toward Natasha. This is for you. Natasha opened it. Inside were papers for a trust fund, already established and funded, with Natasha as the beneficiary. What is this? Natasha asked, confused. You gave Christopher 3 sons, Helen said. You raised them alone for 4 years while we lived in comfort and luxury. This is not payment. You can't pay someone for children or for love. But it is an acknowledgement that you deserved better. That you deserve better now. Natasha looked at the numbers and felt dizzy. It was more money than she had made in her entire life. I can't accept this, she whispered. Yes, you can, Helen said firmly. And you will. Those boys need their mother healthy and happy, not stressed and exhausted. Take the money. Use it however you need. Pay off your debts. Go back to school. Start a business. Whatever you want. Why are you doing this? Helen reached across the table and took Natasha's hand. Because I want to be a better person. Because I want to know my grandsons. And because you deserve kindness after all the cruelty I showed you. Natasha started crying. She had held everything together for so long, staying strong for the boys, but this unexpected kindness broke through all her defenses. Helen came around the table and hugged her, and Natasha let herself be held, let herself cry for all the hard years and all the loneliness. Thank you, Natasha whispered. No, thank you, Helen said. For giving me another chance. For letting me be a grandmother. I won't waste it, I promise. Over the next few weeks, Helen proved she meant it. She came to the guest house every morning to have breakfast with the boys. She took them on outings to museums and parks. She learned each boy's personality, his likes and dislikes, his quirks and fears. She and Natasha started spending time together too, talking about the boys but also about other things. Books, politics, the farm. Helen told stories about Christopher as a child, and Natasha shared stories about her own childhood in Chicago. One afternoon, they were sitting in the guest house living room while the boys napped, and Helen said something that surprised Natasha. I'm glad you came back, Helen said. Not just for Christopher and the boys, but for me too. I had forgotten how to be kind. You've reminded me. You're doing that yourself, Natasha said. I'm just here. No, Helen said. You're doing more than that. You're showing me what strength looks like. What real love looks like. I spent so much of my life worried about appearances and status, and you've shown me none of that matters. Only family matters. Natasha smiled. Maybe we all needed this. A second chance. Maybe we did, Helen agreed. As autumn turned to winter, Christopher and Natasha fell into a routine. He came to the guest house every morning to have breakfast with the boys, then took them to the farm while Natasha had time to herself. In the evenings, they had dinner together, either at the guest house or the main house. It was comfortable and domestic, and it felt dangerous to Natasha because it felt so right. One night, after the boys were asleep, Christopher lingered in the living room longer than usual. Can we talk? He asked. Natasha's heart sped up. Of course. He sat next to her on the couch, closer than he usually did. I've been thinking a lot about us. About what happened and why. Christopher. Please, let me say this. He took a deep breath. When we lost the baby, I didn't know how to handle the grief. My father died when I was young, and my mother never let us talk about it. She just told me to be strong, to push through. So that's what I did. I pushed the grief down and let it turn into anger. I know, Natasha said softly. But I directed that anger at you, and that was unforgivable. You were grieving too, and you needed me, and I abandoned you. Not just emotionally, but in every way that mattered. His voice cracked. You said we weren't meant to be parents together, and I said yes. I said maybe the miscarriage happened for a reason. I told myself I was being honest, but I was just being cruel. And I've regretted those words every single day since. Natasha's eyes filled with tears. I've thought about that night so many times. About what I should have said differently, how I should have fought harder for us. You had nothing to fight for, Christopher said. I had already given up. And then you left, and I realized what an idiot I had been. But by then, it was too late. You were gone, and I thought I would never see you again. I almost called you, Natasha admitted. When I found out about the boys. 100 times, I picked up the phone. But I couldn't forget what you said. I couldn't risk you rejecting them the way you rejected me. I never rejected you, Christopher said fiercely. I was scared and stupid and hurt, but I never stopped loving you. Even when I tried to move on, even when I dated other women, I couldn't stop comparing them to you. No one was ever good enough because no one was you. Natasha's breath caught. Christopher. I know I don't deserve another chance, he said, taking her hands. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be undone. But these past few weeks, watching you with the boys, talking to you every day, I've remembered why I fell in love with you in the first place. Your strength, your kindness, your laugh. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever known, inside and out. You hurt me. So much, Natasha whispered. When you said those things, when you pushed me away, it broke something in me. I told myself I would never let you hurt me again. I know, Christopher said. And I understand if you can't forgive me. But I need you to know that I'm not that man anymore. Losing you taught me what matters. Having the boys in my life has shown me what I missed. I want to be better. I want to be the man you deserved 5 years ago. Natasha looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the regret and the hope mixed together. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared of trusting you again and getting hurt. I'm scared of what it would do to the boys if we tried and failed. I'm scared too, Christopher said. But I'm more scared of not trying. Of wondering for the rest of my life what could have been. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, snow began to fall, the first of the season. I don't know if I can be your wife again, Natasha said slowly. Not right now. Too much has happened. I'm not asking you to be, Christopher said quickly. I'm just asking for a chance. To date you properly this time. To show you I've changed. To build something real and lasting, not just for the boys but for us. Natasha thought about the past weeks. How Christopher had been patient and kind, how he had learned each boy's personality, how he had never once made her feel like she was less than him. He had changed. She could see it in everything he did. Okay, she said softly. We can try. Slowly. The smile that spread across Christopher's face made her heart flutter. Slowly, he agreed. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles gently. The touch sent electricity through her, reminding her of all the reasons she had fallen for him in the first place. Over the next month, they dated like new couples do. Christopher took her to dinner in town, to movies, to art galleries. He held her hand and opened doors and listened when she talked about her dreams and fears. He told her about the years after she left, about how empty the house had felt, how he had thrown himself into work to avoid thinking about her. He talked about going to therapy, about learning to process grief and communicate better. Natasha told him about the boys' births, about the terror and joy of bringing home 3 babies, about the exhaustion and the moments of pure love that made it all worthwhile. She told him about the hard times, the nights she cried because she could not pay rent, the times she had to choose between buying food and paying for heat. I wish I had been there, Christopher said, his voice thick with emotion. I wish I could have helped you, supported you. I hate that you had to do it all alone. But I did do it, Natasha said. And that matters. I proved to myself that I could. That I'm stronger than I thought. You're the strongest person I know, Christopher said. They kissed for the first time on Christmas Eve. The boys were asleep, and they were sitting by the fireplace in the main house, wrapping presents. Christopher leaned over, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and kissed her softly. It felt like coming home. Like all the broken pieces were finally fitting back together. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I never stopped. I love you too, Natasha said, and she meant it. Despite everything, despite all the hurt and the years apart, she still loved him. Maybe she always had. After New Year's, Christopher asked Natasha to meet him in his office at the main house. She went with curiosity, wondering what he wanted to discuss so formally. His office was lined with books and farming journals. A large window overlooked the fields, now covered in snow. Christopher gestured for her to sit in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. I have a proposal for you, he said, pulling out a folder. A business proposal. Natasha raised her eyebrows. I'm listening. Before we got divorced, you had ideas about community outreach programs. About helping low-income families access fresh produce and teaching sustainable farming. She nodded slowly. She had almost forgotten those plans, pushed aside by everything that came after. I want to make those ideas a reality, Christopher said. I want to start a foundation, and I want you to run it. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were detailed plans, budgets, and mission statements. Natasha's breath caught as she read through them. It was everything she had dreamed about, fully funded and ready to implement. Christopher, this is incredible, she whispered. You would have full control, he said. The foundation would be independent, with its own budget and staff. You would be the executive director, with a salary commensurate with the position. I've outlined the compensation in the back. Natasha flipped to the last page and her eyes widened. The salary was more than generous. It was life-changing. You're offering me a job, she asked. I'm offering you a career, Christopher corrected. A chance to do the work you're passionate about, to make a real difference in people's lives. This isn't charity, Natasha. This is recognizing your talents and giving you the resources to use them. Natasha looked at the papers again, her mind racing. This was everything she had wanted. A way to support herself and the boys, a way to do meaningful work, a way to have her own identity beyond being Christopher's ex-wife or the mother of his children. When would this start? She asked. Whenever you're ready. We can start small, with a pilot program this spring. By next year, we could be serving hundreds of families. Natasha thought about her old dreams, about the passion she had felt for this work before everything fell apart. She thought about the families like hers, struggling to put food on the table, who could benefit from this program. Yes, she said firmly. Yes, I want to do this. Christopher's face broke into a smile. I was hoping you'd say that. They spent the next hour discussing details, ideas flowing as they had years ago. Natasha felt alive in a way she had not in years, excited about the future instead of just surviving the present. Thank you, she said when they finally finished. For believing in me. For giving me this opportunity. You don't need to thank me, Christopher said. This was always your vision. I'm just providing the resources to make it happen. That night, Natasha told the boys about her new job. They did not fully understand what it meant, but they were excited that their mother was happy. Does this mean we get to stay? Caleb asked. Natasha looked at Christopher, who had come for dinner as usual. Yes, she said. We get to stay. The boys cheered, and Christopher caught Natasha's eye across the table. The look they shared was full of promise, of hope for a future they were building together. Over the next months, Natasha threw herself into the foundation work. She hired staff, developed programs, and reached out to community organizations. Christopher supported her from the background, offering advice when asked but never interfering. She loved the work. She loved helping families, loved seeing children's faces light up when they learned where their food came from, loved teaching people skills that would serve them for years to come. And she loved watching Christopher with their sons. He had become the father she always knew he could be. Patient, engaged, present. He coached Caleb's little league team, helped Jordan with his science projects, and spent quiet hours with Thomas doing art. They had dinner together every night, the 5 of them, like a real family. Christopher still lived in the main house, and Natasha still lived in the guest house, but the boundaries between them were blurring. One night in March, after the boys were asleep, Christopher and Natasha sat on the porch of the guest house, watching the stars. "I've been thinking," Christopher said, "about the future. About us." Natasha's heart sped up. "What about us?" "I want us to be a real family," he said. "Not just for the boys, but for us. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you, a real life. Not separate houses and careful boundaries, but a real partnership." "Christopher, I'm not asking you to marry me," he said quickly. "Not yet. I know we're not ready for that. But I'm asking you to think about it. To think about what you want, about whether you can see a future with me." Natasha looked at him, at this man who had hurt her so deeply but who had also changed so much. She thought about the past months, about how happy she had been, about how right it felt when they were all together. "I can see it," she admitted. "I'm still scared, but I can see it." Christopher took her hand. "Then that's enough for now." Spring brought new life to the farm. The fields turned green, flowers bloomed, and the boys spent every spare moment outside. They helped Christopher plant a garden, learned to collect eggs from the chickens, and took riding lessons on the gentle horses. Helen was a constant presence, attending every school event and helping with homework. She had truly become the grandmother the boys needed, loving and patient and always ready with hugs. One Saturday in April, the whole family gathered for a picnic by the pond on the property. Helen had packed enough food to feed an army, and Mrs. Patterson had come along to help with the boys. After lunch, the boys ran off to play by the water's edge, supervised by Mrs. Patterson. Helen, Christopher, and Natasha sat on the blanket, comfortable in each other's company. "I have something to say," Helen announced. "To both of you." Christopher and Natasha exchanged glances. "I've been thinking a lot about the past," Helen said. "About my mistakes and my regrets. And I've realized something important. This family, what we have now, is a gift. A second chance that most people never get." She looked at Natasha. "You could have kept the boys away from us. After everything I did, everything Christopher did, you had every right to raise them on your own and never let us into their lives. But you didn't. You put your pride aside and came here, and you gave us a chance to be a family. They needed their father," Natasha said simply. "They needed both of you," Helen corrected. "And you needed help. But it took courage to ask for it, especially from people who had hurt you." She turned to Christopher. "And you, my son, have become the man I always hoped you would be. I'm proud of you. Not for your business success or your money, but for how you've stepped up as a father. For how you've treated Natasha with respect and kindness. For choosing love over pride." Christopher's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mom. I want you two to get married again," Helen said bluntly. "I know it's not my place to say, but I'm an old woman and I can be blunt. You love each other. The boys need you together. And you deserve to be happy." Natasha laughed, surprised by Helen's directness. "We're working on it." "Well, work faster," Helen said with a smile. "Life is too short to waste time being cautious when you know what you want." That evening, after everyone had gone home and the boys were asleep, Christopher found Natasha in the kitchen making tea. "My mother isn't exactly subtle," he said. "No, she's not," Natasha agreed. "But she's not wrong either." Christopher stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Natasha set down her mug and turned to face him. "I mean, I know what I want. I want us to be a family. A real family. I want to wake up with you, raise our boys together, build the kind of life we should have had 5 years ago. Are you saying?" Christopher's voice was hopeful. "I'm saying I'm ready," Natasha said. "If you are." Christopher pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "I've been ready," he said. "I've been waiting for you. Would you risk your heart again for a love that once hurt you? How do you know when someone has truly changed?" Drop your thoughts below and subscribe to see what happens next in this beautiful journey. They spent that night talking about the future, making plans. Christopher wanted them to move into the main house together, to raise the boys in the home where he had grown up. Natasha agreed, as long as they could redecorate, make it their own. They talked about marriage, about taking it slow but being intentional. About couples therapy to make sure they had the tools to communicate better this time. About creating traditions and memories with the boys. I want to do this right, Christopher said. I want to be the husband you deserve, the father the boys deserve. You already are, Natasha said softly. You've proven it every day for the past 6 months. The next morning, they told the boys that they would all be living together in the main house. The reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Does this mean you and Daddy are getting married again? Jordan asked with his typical directness. Natasha looked at Christopher, who grinned. Eventually, she said. If Daddy asks nicely. Can we be in the wedding? Caleb wanted to know. Absolutely, Christopher said, pulling all 3 boys into a hug. You'll be the most important people there. Thomas, quiet as always, simply wrapped his arms around both his parents and held on tight. 6 months passed in a blur of happiness. Natasha moved into the main house with the boys, and together they redecorated, turning it from Helen's formal showpiece into a warm family home. Artwork from Thomas hung on the walls. Jordan's book collection took over an entire room. Caleb's riding trophies lined the mantel. The foundation Natasha ran was thriving, serving over 200 families and expanding into neighboring counties. She had hired a full staff and was working on securing grants to grow the program even more. Christopher had stepped back from some of his business responsibilities to spend more time with the family. He coached Caleb's baseball team, attended Jordan's science fairs, and took Thomas to art classes in town every Saturday. They went to couples therapy every week, learning to communicate better, to handle conflict in healthier ways. They talked about their fears and their hopes, about the past and the future. And through it all, their love grew stronger. It was different than the first time, more mature and grounded. They had both been broken and had learned to heal, individually and together. On a warm Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after Natasha had shown up at the farm gates, Christopher planned a family picnic. He told Natasha it was to celebrate the anniversary of their reunion, but he had something more planned. Helen helped him set up by the pond, the same spot where they had picnicked in the spring. Mrs. Patterson prepared a feast. The boys were in on the secret, barely able to contain their excitement. When they arrived at the pond, Natasha gasped. The area was decorated with flowers and twinkling lights. A blanket was spread out with all her favorite foods. Christopher, what is all this? She asked. Sit down, he said with a smile. Please. She sat, and the boys crowded around her, giggling. Christopher knelt in front of her and pulled out a small velvet box. Natasha Brooks, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. 1 year ago, you came back into my life and gave me the greatest gift I could ever receive. 3 beautiful sons and a second chance at love. Tears were already streaming down Natasha's face. You are the strongest, kindest, most incredible woman I have ever known. You raised our boys alone when you should have had support. You built a career helping others when you could have been bitter about your own struggles. You forgave me when I didn't deserve it, and you gave us all a chance to be a family. He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring. I promise to love you every single day for the rest of my life. I promise to be the partner you deserve, the father our boys deserve. I promise to never take you for granted again. Will you marry me? Yes, Natasha sobbed. Yes, yes, yes. Christopher slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her while the boys cheered and Helen cried happy tears from where she stood watching nearby. Can we tell her the other surprise? Caleb asked, bouncing with excitement. What other surprise? Natasha asked, laughing through her tears. The boys ran behind a nearby tree and came back leading a golden retriever puppy on a leash. We got a dog, Jordan announced. Her name is Daisy Jr., like Daddy's horse. Natasha laughed and cried at the same time, overwhelmed by happiness. Christopher wrapped his arms around her while the boys played with the puppy. Thank you, she whispered to him. For not giving up on us. Thank you for coming back, he said. For giving me another chance. I won't waste it. The wedding took place 3 months later in January, a small intimate ceremony on the farm. The boys were ring bearers, wearing matching suits and looking so much like their father that several guests cried. Helen gave a speech about second chances and family healing that left everyone emotional. But the most touching moment came when Christopher and Natasha exchanged vows they had written themselves. I promise to choose you every day, Christopher said. In good times and bad, in sickness and health, in joy and sorrow. I promise to listen when you speak, to support your dreams, to be present for our children. I promise to never let grief or pride come between us again. You are my home, Natasha. You always have been. I promise to trust you with my heart, Natasha said. To believe in us even when things get hard. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word, to build a life together that honors both of us. I promise to love you not just for who you are, but for who we are together. You've shown me that people can change, that love can heal, and that second chances are real. They sealed their vows with a kiss as their sons cheered and their family and friends applauded. The reception was held in the barn, transformed into a beautiful venue with lights and flowers. The boys danced with their grandmother, with Mrs. Patterson, and with each other. Christopher and Natasha danced their first dance as husband and wife, holding each other close. I can't believe this is real, Natasha whispered. Believe it, Christopher said. This is our life now. Our family. Our future. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the boys were asleep upstairs in their rooms, Christopher and Natasha stood on the porch of their home, looking out over the farm. Do you remember that first night you came back? Christopher asked. Standing at the gates in the rain? How could I forget? Natasha said. I was terrified. I was too, he admitted. Terrified that I had lost you forever, terrified that I wouldn't know how to be a father, terrified of messing everything up again. But you didn't, Natasha said, leaning into him. We didn't. We got our second chance, and we made the most of it. We did, Christopher agreed, kissing the top of her head. And I plan to spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regret coming back. From inside the house, they heard one of the boys calling out from a bad dream. They went inside together, Natasha's hand in Christopher's, to comfort their son. It was a small moment, an ordinary moment, but it was everything. They were a family. Broken pieces put back together, stronger for having been shattered. A love story that had ended in heartbreak but found its way to a happy ending after all. As they stood in their son's doorway, watching him settle back to sleep, Christopher whispered, I love you. I love you too, Natasha whispered back. And in that moment, in their home filled with love and laughter and second chances, everything was exactly as it should be. The farm that had once been a symbol of their separation had become the foundation of their reunion. The family that had been torn apart by grief and pride had healed through forgiveness and love. And the woman who had stood at the gates with nothing but hope and 3 hungry boys had found not just a home, but the family she had always deserved. Their story was proof that endings could become new beginnings, that mistakes could be forgiven, and that love, real love, could survive anything if given a second chance.